Okay, that is our presentation. Now is to answer your questions.
Okay, so good morning. Cooper Williams has a question. What book do you recommend to study? I'm only trying to get a C13 license, not a general. All books online I have found are for general contractors. So we actually don't recommend books. Your knowledge of your classification should be your experience, that you have to go back on. We do have the study guides as we stated in the workshop, but it won't have everything, obviously, that's in the test. Um, all the questions aren't there. But for me, I would tell you to rely on your experience. Books might just be books, it's not going to be your everyday what you're doing out there in the field. Again, Cooper Williams, another, I have 20 years experience with the C-13 and the Marines as an engineer. I just have people I have worked with in the past who can vouch for my experience. So that's fine. Your experience does have to be 4 years within the last 10 years. And your certifier can be anyone who has firsthand experience of your experience. It doesn't have to be an employer. It does not have to be a licensed contractor. Do we have to, still by Cooper, do we have to do a live scan if we have in the last 18 months for CSLB? I did one for a home improvement sales license. As long as that registration is still good, then your fingerprints will transfer over. If it is expired or if it's been canceled, chances are your fingerprints have been removed. But if what you're saying is you've done it with 18 months and you're still current, your fingerprints will transfer over to your application. And then also Cooper, I only have one employee. Would he be listed on my license or should I put him there? He's an independent contractor. It depends on the entity that you're applying for, Cooper. If it's a sole ownership, he can't be listed. If he's an employee, obviously you're going to hold workers' compensation to cover that employee. So it's really based upon what you're doing as your entity, whether or not he can be listed. If you were a corporation, we would recommend if he's an officer that you've registered with the Secretary of State, he would need to be listed on the license. If he's a member or manager and you have an LLC, he'd have to be listed on the license. But if you're a sole ownership, he's just an employee.
One thing I want to add to that one is if it's your employee, you don't really want to put it on your license if you have corporation or LLC because they can change everything within the license. So the officers, the members or managers, they have to be listed on the license, but your employees is up to you. But I'd let you know if they're coming as officer, member, or manager, then they can make changes to your license history. So go ahead, Dana.
Okay. Adam, my apologies, but I'm still a little unclear and prefer to have this answered expressly. I've been a licensed building contractor in North Carolina for about 18 years and have been actively engaged for more than the required last 4 years. I've built around 100 single-family homes in that time. Does this qualify for a California experience requirement? Please advise. So, Adam, it could. We do, again, have to have 4 years within the last 10 years. It could be by your employer, or if you were the licensee in that other state, someone who has firsthand knowledge of your experience can sign as your certifier on your certification of work experience form. As long as our criteria meets what you have performed in North Carolina, it sounds like it possibly could be a good fit. Remember that RB is structural, and that you have to have 2 unrelated trades with that. So if you meet that criteria, you could submit your experience on your application. And again, we would review it first. There's no pre-qualifications, but it does sound like it could possibly meet the requirements. Ted, for applying for a B2 license where our company's work will be coordinating plumbing, HVAC, and electrical contractors, what experience would count towards the 4-year requirement? So for B2, again, it's going to be 3 or more trades or crafts on a residential project, but you cannot make structural alterations, and that's through load-bearing partition or walls. There's no installation or extended electrical or plumbing systems, and you cannot install or replace an HVAC system. What they are allowed to do, if we're talking about those 3 classifications, is to make modifications like installing recessed lighting, altering the plumber for 2 shower heads, so it can be 3 unrelated trades. You just can't do the installation or extend those systems as I suggested. And again, no structural with the B2. Chin, can we use overseas experience? How can a company certify electronically? So you can use your experience from anywhere in the world. We often get out of country experience, and the company or somebody, again, a certifier who has firsthand knowledge of that experience will have to be your certifier. Again, it doesn't have to be the licensee. It can be a fellow employee, but somebody who was there, who had firsthand knowledge of your experience, can, under perjury of penalty of law, certify your experience when you send that in. Just make sure that whatever classification that you apply for, that the trades that your certifier lists are in compliance with the classification that you're applying for. Ahmed, what do you recommend to study for the B2? Again, my philosophy kind of is your knowledge of your trade is going to be your experience and what you're going to be tested on. We do have study guides. However, again, they do not explore every single question that's going to be on those tests. So I tell applicants that I recommend that they base what they're studying for is what you've done. What did you do? When it comes to the law experience or the law and trade, the law examination, our law book is available online for free that you can download. You can also purchase from Nexus Lexis. But as far as the trade goes, I recommend basing it on what you've done. Anastasia, what forms do you fill out if you have a General B license in Arizona? If you're talking about reciprocity, and you want to possibly have your trade exam waived, with your completed application, which would still have to show your experience 4 years out of the last 10, you could submit a reciprocity form that has already been completed by the Arizona State Contractors Board with your application. Depending upon what is written or what we see from Arizona, we could possibly be able to waive your exam. For the B trade only, you would still be required to take the law. If that doesn't answer your question, Anastasia, please send us an email at licensing@cslb.ca.gov. Kate, does CSLB accept foreign work experience? What documents should be provided? So yes, Kate, we do provide, or we do accept foreign work experience. Again, your work experience can be wherever you lived. So it just has to be in compliance with what classification that you're applying for. And again, your certifier does not have to be your employer per se, but does have to be somebody who has firsthand knowledge of your experience in that classification where you got that experience from. Bianca, I have a bachelor's and master's in art. How many years of experience does this qualify? So Bianca, unfortunately, we can't give you a clear-cut answer on that. You can see the examples that we have listed right now of possible credit that you could receive. It also is dependent on what classification that you send in on your application. Is your degree associated with the class that you're applying for? So I can't give you a clear-cut answer on that, and it will go hand in hand with the classification when you send in your application of how much credit that you could possibly receive. Ahmed is the same thing. I have a civil engineering degree. Does that qualify me for the education requirement? If you look at the slide that's showing right now, the possibilities are there. However, again, we would have to see the classification that you're applying for because the degree has to go hand in hand and be associated to the class. So I cannot give you a clear-cut answer on that. But do make sure that when you send in your application, do not send your transcripts ahead of time. Make sure they either come in with your application or afterwards so that we can match up. That this goes to Ahmed, and here he is, he's applying for this classification. We do tend to get a lot of transcripts and no applications. So that will eliminate, applicants sending in things that, that are just out there and nobody can match it up with anything. So, hi, my father is a licensed contractor. If I want to take over his license, do I have to file for a new license? Okay, so there are different qualifications for possibly taking over a license. If he has a sole ownership, is he retiring? If it's a corporation, have you been listed on the license? There's a little more information that we would need for that. If you could send us an email at licensing@cslb.ca.gov. We can give you a little bit more detailed information, but we will need a little bit more information from you as well. Ambarish, hi, I have studied 4 years diploma and 4 years bachelor degree in electrical engineering and experience from India for 8 years. Do I require an exam? So all applicants will be subject to examination for the classification that you've applied for. The education does not substitute or grant you a waiver for the trade or for the law. You will still be required to take the trade. As seen on the slide here, dependent upon the credit that you would receive for your degree, the maximum that anybody could possibly get would be 36 months. So you would still have to submit 1 year of work experience. But again, that credit is dependent upon your degree and the classification that you have submitted on your application. So yes, you would have to take an exam. And again, because if you've never applied here before, you would have to do that. And you would also have to take the law because there is no waiver of the law in this case. The experience from India, as long as it's 4 years within the last 10 years, would be acceptable. Again, someone who has firsthand knowledge of that experience, where that experience was had, would have to certify you, and you would send that in on your application completed by your certifier. Bianca, can my certifier be related to me? We don't prohibit that. They could have been the one who works side by side with you. So if you've seen the certification of work experience, it does have a lot of options that you can use. You can use as your certifier a fellow employee, an employer, a contractor, a business associate, a union representative. There's quite a few different options that you can use. So we don't ask if that person is related to you, but we do want to see, again, on your certification and work experience, that the work pertains to the classification you're applying for, and the time is the 4 years within the last 10 years. Embarish, I don't have a SSIN and no tax identification number. I'm on adjustment of status. I'm not sure what an adjustment of status is. However, to apply for a contractor's license in the state of California, it is a requirement that the individual has a social security number or an I-10 in order to apply for a license. Unfortunately, if you do not, I would say that you could not apply. Taxashila. I worked as an architect in India, but not in USA. How can I get my general contracting license? So an architect, we don't license architects. We do license general builders. So dependent on what your experience in India would be what we would want to see on your certification of work experience. If you drew up plans, that's not going to qualify you for the general building contractor's license. If you actually hammer and nailed things, if you were a supervisor on a license that did general building and you were supervising employees, if you were a foreperson, that work experience, depending on what is listed, would or could possibly be acceptable. But as an architect, if I were to do a definition here in the US, drawing up plans and whatnot would not qualify you for the general building license. Bianca, can a certifier be a client? Yes, they can. Again, business associate, there are probably about 7 different options that you have for the certifier that's listed on the certification of work experience form. Embarish, I am also an electrician license holder in Canada. Do I require an exam or not? If you haven't been licensed here in California, yes, you would have to exam. There would be no waiver exam from another country or another state unless we had reciprocity and the proper forms were completed. So the exams are necessary, the exams are mandatory, and they would not be waived for another country or another state, again, unless we had reciprocity and it was approved. Bianca, I am not listed on the LLC. I work for and am an independent contractor. Does a license apply for that LLC, or do I need to be listed to the LLC? So Bianca, to apply for the qualifier, if you're replacing the qualifier, you would have to show your experience, again, 4 years out of the last 10 years. And possibly you would have to test for the exams. If you're not listed on the license, if you haven't tested before for the classification in California, it is very likely that you will have to do that. This would not be a brand new application as an original contractor's license. This would be a replacer, replacing the qualifying individual application, which is also listed on our website. But that would be if you are replacing the qualifying individual, which I believe you said earlier in a comment. Bianca, if you want to shoot us an email over at licensing@cslb.ca.gov, we can give you a little bit more detailed information, depending on if you can give us a little bit more information in the situation. Ahmed, can I have my wife's name under the LLC name as an owner, and I, as a qualifier, take the license? So LLCs have managers and members. There are no owners. And whomever you have appointed manager or member on the LLC, if you have them listed with the California Secretary of State, they will have to be listed on the application. You could still be the qualifier on the application. However, it doesn't matter whose name is a manager or member. If you're a manager or member, you're going to list yourself on the application. If your wife is a manager or member, they're going to be listed on the application. Your LLC and your corporations have to be registered before you submit your application. For LLCs, we do require that a statement of information or an SOI also be completed before your application is submitted so that we do know who is listed on the application or who should be listed on the application. But yeah, you could still be the qualifier. You would have to take the test, and whoever you appoint to be managers and members on the LLC would have to be listed on the application. Wife, business associate, anybody. Kate, who can evaluate foreign work experience for a C-33? Any engineer, construction, or contractor professional with a license or only with a C-33 license who should sign a certificate of work experience. So, as I stated before, there's about 7 options. It does not have to be your employer. It does not have to be a licensed contractor. It does have to be somebody who has firsthand experience of your experience that you obtained in that foreign setting, in another state. Any of those recommended people can be your certifier. Bianca, how many certifiers can you have? Well, depending on how many different employers that you had to meet that 4-year requirement or the 48 months. Let's say you worked at ABC company for 3 years and 2 months and XYZ company for the remaining time. You would have 2 different certification of work experiences. If your certifier is the same person who saw you work at ABC and XYZ, I mean, it could be possible that you only have 1 certifier and they've completed both certification of work experience forms for you. If you have a different certifier for each employer, then, it's dependent upon that. How many work experience forms that you submit and who actually saw you do the work. If you have 10 employers, and it's 10 different people who saw you do the work, then obviously you might have 10 certifiers. J. Raj, as a project engineer for heavy civil work or roadway and bridges work, may I be eligible to get the A General Engineering Contractor license? So, when it comes to the A General Builder, did you work for a licensed contractor? Did you perform the work that is outlined in our description of the A General Engineering Contractor? Again, if it's drawing up plans, if it's not hands-on or supervision of the classification, and it doesn't meet the criteria of the description of the classification, I would state that no, you might not be eligible for the general engineering contractor license. However, if you have a degree because you are a project engineer and you're doing civil work, you might want to send that in also, your transcripts, your official transcripts, so that we can maybe assess your education to help with that work experience. However, you do need to have the hands-on or the supervision in the A General Building, the A General Engineering. Fawn, do you have anything to add to that?
Yes, we do not, qualify you here because we don't have really the details of that. So what I recommend, you can use the experience, but you have to submit your application for us to review the experience and then give you a feedback because with this much information, we can't really tell. But I do definitely recommend that you submit your application if you have actually experience doing that work, and we go from there. But we cannot verify or qualify you online here.
Okay. Ray, the application states that we can send the transcripts directly to the CSLB, but during the presentation, it was stated we need to send the transcript instead. What should I do if I have submitted my application already and asked my university to send my transcript directly to you? Is it still required if I'm a registered professional engineer where the transcript is already taken into account? So if your application is already here and let's say you don't have 4 years experience within the last 10 years listed on your application, I would suggest to have your official transcripts sent by your school directly to CSLB. They can reference your application fee number. They can reference your name. CSLB will need to have them in order to possibly give you credit for the classification, towards the classification that you've applied for. It is required. If you want to use education as part of your work experience, you will need to send in your official transcripts, regardless that if you're a registered professional engineer with a different board or bureau of the state. So my dad will be my certifier. What box do I check for the relationship section? Well, you can do business associate. You can do employer if you worked for your father. If he's a contractor license holder, it can be contractor. It's dependent upon what the relationship is with him. If he works side by side with you, it could be fellow employee. It's just dependent upon what your father saw you do firsthand in your experience. Also, my father is a General B licensed contractor. When filling out the application for my own General B license, do I just put his company name as my own? He is a sole proprietorship. So if you're filling out an application for your own license, you're not going to put his company name. If he is where you gained your experience on your certification of work experience form, he would definitely be your employer. And in part 1, and then in part 2, he could fill out the portion for the certifier. But when you're applying for your own license, you're going to select your own business name. So I'm not certain if you're talking about the certification of work experience or the actual business name of your employer on the certification of work experience form. What can a B1, which is a B, do compared to a B2? So a B can do your structural alterations to your existing building, to a building that's going to be built. It can install your plumbing, your electrical, your HVAC, whereas your B2 can only is limited to working on existing residential wood frame structures, and there can be no structural alterations. They can't install or extend your electrical or plumbing systems and cannot install or replace your HVAC, whereas your B could if it was part of the structural component with the 2 unrelated trades. B2 is 3 unrelated trades. So the B is definitely is allowed to do a lot more. B2 is for remodeling, it's for renovations, on a residential home. So it's not going to allow you to do all the big things that a B builder could do. You're not going to be able to build. I hope that answers your question, Junior. Jennifer, qualifier on your procurement salesperson. You are already able to sign your contracts, alter your contracts, and go out and meet with your customers. The only time you would have to have HIS is if a person not listed on your license is going out to do those things, to alter an agreement, a contract, to put a new contract in order, to sell your merchandise. Then you would have to have a registered HIS, but you, as a person of personnel on your license, do not have to be registered. Trinity, my company is a California corp and I will be working as an apprentice under a qualifying individual. Well, I need bond insurance and workers' compensation is carried because they are an employee. All corporations, sole ownerships, LLCs, partnerships are required to have the bond requirements, as well as workers' comp if they hold a certain classification or if there's employees listed or an RME. You as an individual, no, but the company could be subject to those. Again, a bond is always required for the company. The workers' comp is dependent upon the classification and if there's an employee listed on the license. Or if there's employees that aren't listed on the license and you go out limited partnership or a partnership, they would have to be. You'll receive a corporation registration number for the California Secretary of State for corporations, an LLC registration number for your LLC, and an FEIN number for partnerships or limited before submittal. Sandy, does a master's in project experience? So again, the credit that you could possibly obtain from your official transcripts would go hand in hand with whatever classifications that you're applying for. It could substitute up to 36 months, as per the slide that's showing on the workshop at the moment. However, you would still have to have hands-on experience or be a supervisor for a person for a company that is working, in the classification that you're applying for. It would not be substituted for all of the experience, but it definitely could give you experience credit, education. But yeah, it wouldn't be for the whole kit and caboodle. Again, you'd have to have a minimum of 1 year work experience that someone would have to certify on the certification of work experience form. Kate, does master's degree in engineering give any amount of credit? Again, Kate, for everybody watching, we do have the slide up. We can't guarantee what your degree will give you. It would have to be submitted with your application or after your application's been submitted, and it would go hand in hand with the classification that you're applying for. We cannot predetermine how much credit you can get without first reviewing your application and the transcripts. Erica, can I list my wife on my license if she will be managing? Also, can my wife register as an HIS for my general B? So, Erica, it depends. Is the license a sole ownership? Because only one person is generally listed on a sole ownership, so they can't be on the license. They can be an employee, and they could definitely be registered as an HIS with the license if it's a sole ownership. If it's a corporation, an LLC, you could add them if that's what you desire, or you could register them as an HIS to do business for you, for your company, your corporation, or your LLC. If you are a partnership, it is important to know no people can come on or be removed after it's established. Otherwise, it does cancel out your partnership or limited partnership. So you could not add or subtract people from them. You could still register an HIS though for a partnership if that was general project. You may want to finalize permits, possibly inspections, and who else worked on the project with you and what they did. So CSLB does want to see, we do need to be able to ascertain your role in the project and that you did what you're claiming on the owner builder. I've seen as low business in California, or sorry, in the US and sent to us, If it's just class courses and transcripts. Heather, if I'm the qualifier and owner, how would I answer section 3, line 7, and my partner is half owner 50/50 and put on section 4 for California Corporation? So section 3, if we're talking about page 1, is about the qualifier. So if you were the qualifier, you would put your 50% owner. If your other person who's going to be listed on this license, again, corporation, LLC, or partnership, holds the other portion. Now, the personnel will not be listed, will not be prompted to list a percentage. It's only the qualifier that we're concerned about as far as percentage of ownership. A sole owner owes 100%, so there are no partners, there is no 50/50. You would put 100%. The other entities could be less than 100%, however, that needs to be listed. So it is dependent upon what you're applying for. Again, if it's a sole ownership, there's no 50/50. It is 100% for the qualifier. Section 4 is the additional personnel section. So you just put that person's name, fill out all of their information, full legal name, social date of birth, they sign it, they date it, they print their name. And again, no percentage of ownership is there. It's based on what the qualifier is going to own of the corp, LLC, or partnership. Sandy, looks like others have asked similar questions, so you could skip my question. Thank you, Sandy. Mike, I'm a level 3 high power EV charging station manufacturer vending company. Should my company have a C10 license or in order for letting us to perform on-site troubleshoot, repair, and maintenance service over the multiple job locations in California? Fuad, you want to chime in on this?
Can you read that question to me one more time?
I am a level 3 high power EV charging station manufacturer vendor company. Should my company have a C10 license in order for letting us to perform on-site troubleshoot, repair, and maintenance service over the multiple job locations in California?
Yeah, for that one, I would refer them to the deputy classification. Okay. Yeah, classifications at cslb.ca.gov. Our deputy will ask you more questions about what you were doing so they can better guide you in what you can or cannot do or whether you need a license or not.
Right. Thank you, Fuad.
Sure.
Chow, my father is a General B licensed contractor, sole proprietor. He is not retiring. I want to get my own license, but still keep the family company. What form do I fill out? So if he's not retiring, you can't take over the family company. If you're applying as your own individual for a license, you're going to use the original application for a contractor's license. Your father, I'm assuming, again, is your certifier, so he's going to complete your certification of work experience form. And again, if you received your experience from him, he could be the contractor, he can be the employer, he can be your business partner or business associate. But if he's not retiring, you cannot take over his license. There are certain qualifications that are needed to take over a license, and this doesn't sound like it would be one of them. Now, as a sole owner, we do not mandate, and there is no law that allows people not to have the same business name as a sole owner. So there could be a ton of D'Onofrio general buildings. Seriously doubtful, but or Johnson General Contracting. There can be thousands of them in our database. When it comes to name style, we don't mandate the sole ownership. It does have to be in compliance with the classification. However, it's not registered with the California Secretary of State. So if, let's say, Dad's company is John's General Building. Obviously, if your name is not John, you cannot use John's General Building. But let's say it's your last name. Let's say it's Johnson's General Building. You could still be a Johnson's General Building. You would be issued a brand new license number because, again, you're not taking over your father's license because he's not retiring or he's not stepping away from his license. But you would receive a brand new license number. But you could, it's a possibility, use the same name as long as it's in compliance with our state law. And again, it's just going to be your application for a or for a contractor's license. Mike, it looks like you asked this already. Yes, so we did answer your same question that was submitted just a little bit lower. Heather, on your application, when not applicable, do we just put NA on the first line or every space? Well, it's dependent on what that is. If you're applying for a sole ownership, you're filling out page 1 in its entirety. Page 2, which is section 4, you don't have to put anything because there's not going to be any additional personnel listed on your sole ownership. On your required questions, you are required to answer number 10 through 14. 13 and 14 are dependent upon your title. And the second section of the required questions, those are only if they apply to you. When it has to deal with reciprocity, with your, do you have education that you want us to look at? Are you a military member? Those you don't even have to submit, or you can submit those blank because those are not applicable to you. And the second page of the required questions aren't required, so you don't need those. When it comes to the work experience form, you do not want to put NA. You do want to fill that out in its entirety in part 1 for you, part 2 for your certifier. It does have to be submitted, and every portion has to be completed. If you don't have a middle name, because this seems to be an issue with a lot of applications that come in, we do ask per the instructions that you put NMN for no middle name. You could put not applicable, the NA, that would be fine also, but do not leave it blank. Because then we're going to have to ask you, hey, do you have a middle name? Could you please give me your middle name? So there are some things that you could possibly use NA, but there are other things that we don't recommend that you do use that because we might have to send your application back to get it corrected. And then again, we have to start not from scratch, but we have to start over with your process. Chin, B and B2 are very close. I'm interested in remodeling. Do I have to get first B and then B2, or can B do B2 responsibilities? So they're not very close. They are very different. Again, a B1 allows you to do allows you to build from the ground up a home, a structure, a habitable structure. A B2 does not. A B2 allows you to work on an existing residential wood frame structure. You can't do any alterations to a load-bearing wall or partitions. You cannot install or replace an HVAC system. So they are very, very different. The B allows you, again, from the ground up to build a building. Again, with your B, you're doing a structural component with 2 unrelated trades. So maybe you're installing the electrical and the HVAC. Maybe you're doing the plumbing. There are your minimum of structural and the 2 unrelated. Your B2 has to have 3 unrelated. And again, as I stated, they cannot be structural and cannot be installation or replacement of or an extension of electrical, plumbing, or HVAC systems. Now, you are allowed with the B2 to modify the existing systems, like install your recessed lighting and alter plumbing, but nothing above and beyond that. So they are very different. Some people I've seen apply for the B3 or the B2 with their 3 unrelated trades. Will have fencing, painting, and let's say landscaping. They don't even have to go hand in hand with each other. but, you know, be related, but you have to show those 3 unrelated trades in order to apply for that B2 and have that experience. So they are very different of what's allowed and what's not allowed. Kate, could a certification of work experience form from a foreign certifier be signed by email, or should we have the original signature? You can definitely send it via email. We do ask that it is a signature, that it's not a font. I believe we are allowing DocuSign. Is that correct, Fod?
That is correct.
But we don't want to see a font because who signed it? You can send it via email. It doesn't have to be the wet signature. It can go back and forth like that.
The best way would be if you just email them the certification of work experience, they print it, complete it, sign it, and scan it and email it back to you, then you can send it to us. That would be the best course of action.
Erica, can my wife also register as an HIS for my general B? So Erica, again, if your wife is not listed on the license, let's say it's a sole ownership again, you can have your wife register as an HIS and then be associated with your license as an HIS. If it's a corporation or a LLC or a general partnership and they're not listed on the license already, you can add them to a corporation or LLC, or you can opt to do the HIS registration and have them associated that way. For a general partnership or a limited partnership, again, nobody can come off or on. So the best would be to do an HIS registration with them associated with the license. So it is really based upon, is your wife already listed on your license? Are they going to be listed on your license, and what entity you're applying for? Barish, for a C10 license total, how much credit is required? I'm not certain if you're asking about experience or if you're asking about transcripts, but all classifications are required to have 4 years, 48 months of experience in the classification that you've applied for. Again, if it is transcripts, we would have to see the transcripts with your application in order to make the determination if you're going to receive education credit for that. And again, it's based upon what you have on your degree, or let's say your classes that you've taken versus the classification that you've applied for. Gerald, I've been working as a self-employed handyman for 7 years. I'm applying for a B2 license. Do I go back to every customer as my certifiers or just larger jobs? That's up to you. If you could, just as a recommendation, if you could do your larger jobs and let's say, again, have 3 years with one person and 1 year with another, you know, it makes less paperwork for you to submit to CSLB. But we do have to have, you know, that 4 years. So if that means you don't have larger jobs and you do have to have 10 separate work certificates, you know, that might have to happen. But I would recommend to make it less paperwork if you could do the larger jobs, as long as they're within the last 10 years and you have 4 years full-time experience. Junior Navarro, what are the qualifications for the B1? So your experience, again, is going to be a structural component because you can build a house from the ground up with 2 unrelated trades. It might be helpful to advise at this time that there's a couple classifications that you can't do as a B, which would be your C57 well and the C16 fire suppression. So other than that, if you have a structural component that you've done for 4 years and you've been doing installation of electrical, painting, drywall, plastering, plumbing, you know, if you have that structural component with the 2 unrelated trades, it's a possibility that you could apply for it. Again, 4 years out of the last 10 years experience is what would be needed. Ray, thank you for answering all of the question. I have been previously listed as an RMO on a contractor's license. The application for states that the certification of work experience may not be required. Can you please clarify? Ray, it's dependent upon how long ago you were a qualifier. If it's current and it's the same classification and you qualify for a waiver, then you're not going to need to submit the certification of work experience. However, we would have to look at that. We would check your prior license history once we do receive your application to see, were you licensed in the classification that you're now applying for? Was it within a certain amount of time? Is it still current? So it is based on a couple different scenarios. If you want to send me or send us an email at licensing@cslb.ca.gov and give me a little bit more information. You can make it attention to me. I can give you a little bit more information about the waiver application. Sandy, what if I'm an owner builder of a residence from 1998 to 1999? Unfortunately, Sandy, that is out of the work experience 10-year allotment allowed by state law. So we could not go back that far. Again, all work experience, no matter what classification that you're applying for, does have to be 4 years out of the last 10 years from the date that you submit your application. We cannot go back any further. Jocelyn, can the certifier be an officer in the corporation and listed on the license as long as they are not the qualifier? The certifier, again, Jocelyn, can be anyone, pretty much anyone. Your options on your certification of work experience allows for a business associate, which I would consider an officer, an employer, fellow employee, again, a union representative. It can be any of those. Your officer, another officer, as long as they have firsthand knowledge of your experience, can be your certifier for your work experience. The qualifier can be if they have firsthand knowledge, they can be your certifier for your work experience. It's just someone who has that firsthand knowledge. Sandy P, can I build as an owner builder of an ADU to gain experience? As long as that ADU that you're building, again, has a structural component with the two unrelated trades. The B is looking for your, again, structural component with the two unrelated trades. And you would complete the owner builder form, the project list, and again, you would have to have your permits listed on the owner builder project list, as well as your permits with the application, so that we could ascertain your role in the projects that you have submitted. Erica, how long is application process once submitted prior to getting exam date? So as we mentioned, we do receive thousands of applications per year, and hundreds probably each week. Right now we do have a little bit of a backlog. I'd say probably just a guesstimate, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. For a more accurate reading, you might want to check our website under our current processing times, which is updated every Monday morning, to let you know, hey, if this application was submitted on December 29th of last year, this is what we're currently working on. We do have quite a few techs working on all of the applications, and we are doing our best to get everything out in a timely manner. Yeah, if you want a more accurate reading, please check our website, and it'll tell you, compared to obviously what today's date is, what we're actually working on in each department by the application type. Erica, does my wife have to also get fingerprinted if she's listed on my license? Everybody listed on the license has to be fingerprinted. HIS also, If they register to be a HIS to be associated with your license, they will also have to meet the fingerprint requirements. Embarish. For C10 license total, how much credit is required? I think you asked this question before. And again, 4 years full-time experience within the last 10 years. And I cannot give you a education credit exact amount. Again, we cannot pre-qualify you for that. That would have to be submitted with your application in order for us to determine if we were going to give any education credit for that. Heather, so the law and business, is that the first test taken? Generally, it's the trade. From what I've seen, is the trade is done.
I jump in there for
Okay.
this one. Right now, PSI exam administrating our exams. So once we set you up for exam, you will receive a letter from us with a link to their site, and you can actually choose the time you take the exam. Law separate, trade separate. It's up to you which one you want to take first or last, or together, or separate days. So that would be in your hands once we refer you to the exam. Now, at this point, I'm sorry, we're running out of time. So if you have any further questions, please feel free to send it at licensing@cslb.ca.gov. Thank you for your questions. If at some point you need to reschedule your exam, you can get that process started by dropping an email to exams@cslb.ca.gov. We have also put together a list of available resources for women considering a career in construction. If you haven't already, be sure to download this presentation to get them. You can download the presentation on a green banner on the top of our homepage at www.cslb.ca.gov. If you are watching the archive video of this workshop on our YouTube page, you will find a link to the presentation down below.
Okay, we welcome your comments or topics for future webcasts. Just drop us an email to social@cslb.ca.gov. Special thanks to our licensing division and public affairs office for their help on this workshop. The Get Licensed to Build workshop is a copyrighted production of the California Contractor State License Board. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.